majority nations produce a disproportionately small share of the world's scientific output. Annually, more books are translated into Spanish than into Arabic in the last 1,000 years. The lack of scientific output is stunning. There is no single explanation for the negligence of science in the Islamic world, just as there is no single ruler who inaugurated it and no single event that fueled it. The truth is that the Islamic Golden Age witnessed a complex sequence of unforeseen events. My name is Shirvan and welcome to Caspian Report. The Abbasids had started out as a Persian nationalist revolt. The dynasty shared many of the Sassanid traditions, including maintaining a vast imperial library. Thus, the availability of cheap paper contributed to the expansion of the imperial library of Al-Rashid. The Caliph employed scholars to translate Greek, Chinese, Sanskrit, and Persian works in the field of physics, chemistry, mathematics, astronomy, philosophy, geography, and other faculties into Arabic. Advances in technology help to solve everyday problems. For instance, the study of astronomy and trigonometry helped to determine the direction to Mecca, the times for prayer, etc. Technological process also improved engineering techniques and even sparked an agrarian revolution. As scholars worked tirelessly to translate every available scientific text, the Abbasids, without even realizing it, had successfully globalized knowledge. Eventually, this massive undertaking would become known as the translation movement, and it established Arabic as a scientific language of antiquity. As the movement gained momentum, the Abbasid Empire, which was already known as a military, economic, and cultural powerhouse, also became an intellectual haven. To that end, ambitious scholars who sought peace and stability for their research immigrated to the Islamic world. One such family was the Barmakids dynasty from Balkh. The household of Buddhist origins became known for their patronage of physicians and the study of medicine. Another dynasty was the Buktishu, a Christian family of surgeons who helped translate the Zoroastrian and Sassanid studies, either way from Italy and Scandinavia to China and India. If you wanted to pursue science, the Abbasid Empire was the place to be. The quest for scientific achievements accelerated during the reign of Al-Mamnun, the seventh Abbasid ruler. He converted Baghdad's imperial library into the House of Wisdom and thus established a formal institution of learning. He also placed the physician Ibn Ishaq in charge of the translation of foreign scripts. Ibn Ishaq was such an accomplished translator of Greek knowledge that he is often referred to as the Sheikh of translators. In any case, the House of Wisdom was the most ambitious educational undertaking since the foundation of the Library of Alexandria. It was the Silicon Valley of the Abbasids, and it ushered in the Islamic Golden Age. In any case, as the Abbasids came in contact with Greek philosophy, Indian numeral system, Persian rule of law, and other Chinese and Roman studies, the scholars became genuine students of Socrates, Aristotle, Plato, Ptolemy, Brahmagupta, Sushruta, and others. It wasn't long before Persian and Arab scholars adapted foreign ideas and improved on those concepts. One example was the assimilation of Neoplatonic philosophy and Aristotelian metaphysics in the Islamic context by Al-Kinda, who is unanimously hailed as the father of Arabic philosophy. The translation movement is mostly lost in the modern educational curriculum, but it's an acknowledgement that the receptiveness of the Muslim rulers and scholars to foreign ideas was the primary catalyst that paved the way for the Islamic Golden Age. As the assimilation of knowledge ignited a trend towards Aristotelianism and Neoplatonism, a new collective of scholars emerged. Its students were known as the Mutazilites, and their doctrine was mostly based on ancient Greek philosophy, but adjusted within Islamic context. A prime contention of the Mutazila belief was that the metaphysical world, which includes objects and properties, space and time, cause and effect, could be used to understand not just the physical world, but also the nature of God and creation. In other words, its members were united in their conviction that it was necessary to give a rationally coherent account of Islamic beliefs. What's more is that the group did not necessarily use the Quran and the Sunnah as the only sources of understanding. They believed that human existence was not predetermined and that humankind made decisions independently of God's will. As such, the Mutazilites believed in absolute free will. Nowadays, it is difficult to imagine this because the modern situation differs so greatly from the past. However, at the time, rational Mutazilism was the universal doctrine of the Muslim communities. In fact, the Mutazila creed was so appreciated that the Abbasid rulers formally enforced it. In the year 833, Khalif al-Mamnun, the seventh Abbasid ruler, saw an opportunity to acquire religious authority at the expense of the ulama scholars. He formally institutionalized the Mutazila doctrine and sought to eradicate other theological schools. As such, the Khalif enforced an inquisition known as the Mihna. Scholars who were employed in state-funded schools and madrasas were forced to profess their allegiance to Mutazilism and submit to the curricula of Neoplatonic philosophy and Aristotelian metaphysics. Those who refused were punished by lashing, imprisonment, or beheading. Al-Mamnun passed away in the same year as he decreed the Inquisition, but his policy was continued through his immediate successors. Most intellectuals submitted to the official Mutazila creed. However, a scholar named Ibn Hanbal from Baghdad refused to recognize the rationalist doctrine. He argued that the Quran was eternal and that it was not open for interpretation or innovation. Hence, the scholar and his followers rejected free will, metaphysics, rationalism, and subscribed to the literal interpretation of the Quran. Ibn Hanbal's theological view could not be more different than the Mutazilite scholars, who argued that the anthropomorphic verses in the Quran, which mention the hands, eyes, and face of God, indicate that the Holy Book should not be interpreted literally. Building on that, the Mutazilites stressed that the Quran was open to rational interpretation and innovation. In any case, for his defiance, Ibn Hanbal was imprisoned, tortured, and even banished from Baghdad. For over a decade, the Abbasid rulers tried to break the scholar, but in their pursuit, the Caliphs had inadvertently made Ibn Hanbal a folk hero. Over time, the Inquisition became unpopular with the people, and in some cases, riots erupted in the streets of Baghdad in support of Ibn Hanbal. Under these circumstances, in 847, al-Mutawakkil ascended to the throne as the 10th Abbasid ruler. At the age of 26, he reigned over the largest empire in the world. Yet, his authority was in question and he needed to swiftly restore his legitimacy. Thereupon, al-Mutawakkil enforced a populist decision. The Caliph ended the Inquisition and effectively endorsed the literal creed of Ibn Hanbal. In the end, the defiant scholar had outlived 3 caliphs. As he was hailed a champion of Islam, Ibn Hanbal founded his own institution of theology that bore his name. This had a profound impact on the course of Islamic civilization. For one, religious authority became an exclusive purview of the ulama scholars, and the caliph's role was reduced to political authority. Second, Ibn Hanbal's defiance reduced the credibility of the Mutazila. As such, in the following decades, a backlash against Mutazilism spread across the Abbasid realm. And third, the end of the Inquisition facilitated the formation of more orthodox theological movements, many of which are still active. For instance, at the present, the Safaist school is predominant in East Africa and Southeast Asia, while the Maliki school holds an influence in Africa's Maghreb and Sahel region. Meanwhile, the Hanafi curricula prevails in the former Ottoman territories and Central Asia. As for the school of Ibn Hanbal, in the 18th century it experienced a reformation in the Wahhabi Salafi movement, and therefore its influence is limited but predominant in Saudi Arabia. Many of the great minds of the Islamic Golden Age were also fierce critics of the literal interpretation of the Quran. For instance, Al-Biruni, who calculated that the earth revolved around the sun and rotated on its axis, challenged the literal creed of Ibn Hanbal by insisting that it was essential to question everything from religion to philosophy. The irrational position was shared by Al-Razi, who was a scholar of Da Vinci's magnitude and once argued that Islam without reason had no value. Then there was Khayyam, one of the most influential thinkers of the Middle Ages. He was a fierce patron of humanism and expressed secular ideas in opposition to the design of Sharia law. Another leading scholar was Ibn Rushd, who advocated for the emancipation of women and stressed that matters of belief should be decided only on the basis of reason and evidence. It was clear that the Mutazilites were fighting back against orthodox theology. However, the political circumstances were not in their favor. Despite their best efforts, within a century, the great minds of the Islamic Golden Age would end up as